Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is an HP Omen PC that I purchased on eBay. It was listed as 4 parts or not working and it cost me just £50 plus £8 postage. The box here I don't think is the original because the pictures were actually different on the website. Apparently this has 16GB of RAM and that's all I really know. Other than that, it supposedly has a 480 RTX, which of course isn't a graphics card, so it'll be interesting to see what we do actually have in here, what the specs are and what the problem with it is. This was actually described as having problems turning on, so it may turn on, it may not, there may be 1 or 2 components broken, the whole thing might be broken, but let's get it out of the box, fire it up and see what £58 worth of HP Omen PC gets us in 2024 and see whether or not we can solve this thing's problems. Aside from the PC itself, well, we did get a power cable in the box, which is always appreciated. I must have about 10,000 of these lying around now, but I'll just add this one to the collection. So as you can see, this isn't the HP Omen pictured on the front of the box, but I pretty much knew that already. I do much prefer the look of this model though. I can't tell how old this one is at this point, nor do I know any in-depth details regarding the specifications, but let's open it up and see what we have. First though, the outside, I like this carbon fibre effect surrounding the front panel. We've got USB audio jacks here, USB-C. These things at the front, I believe, open up if I can get hold of them. Yeah, so I think these are HDD bays. You can just pull these out like that, and then you could stick a hard drive in there if you want to. Very handy. It would help if we actually unlocked this one though. I realised this watching this back that I looked a bit silly trying to pull this one out, but there we are, 2 drive bays at the front. Around the back, you can see this is quite a dusty machine. We do indeed have a graphics card in here though. Yeah, a lot of dust build up here, especially in that PSU fan. Pulling the side panel off revealed the bright red motherboard. You'd think this was an AMD system, but it's actually Intel. The graphics card is AMD, however. I don't believe this is a proprietary motherboard, not 100% anyway. More on that though a little later on. As you can see, the PSU does have a couple of 6+2 pin PCIe connectors. The immediate issue was that the power supply cable wasn't plugged into the graphics card, so this may be a very simple fix, but it could be that this has just been shaken loose during transit, which does happen quite a lot of the time, and it's why I'm often put off actually shipping whole PCs to people online. We'll just plug that back in though. So we have an 80 plus bronze PSU. Hopefully this isn't the problem, but as I mentioned before, I don't believe this is a completely proprietary system. Now I noticed that we have a 24 pin header for power. We've got an 8 pin CPU connector up top as well. There are a few little connectors on the motherboard, however, that are proprietary, so I don't think you could swap out the board or put this board in another system, because at least in terms of this case you'd lose access to certain lighting effects and perhaps other features. So if you were to replace the motherboard in here, you'd have a lot of cables that you wouldn't be able to plug in, so you might lose lights at the front. Maybe there are other things as well, but I'm glad it's not proprietary power too, so if the PSU were to be the problem, then this could be swapped out. There are 2 sticks of DDR4 in here, so I'm assuming that the 16GB listed was accurate. We have a Wi-Fi card in here too, and overall it looks quite dusty, but I'm pretty pleased with this, especially for the money. Now on the initial boot up, it took a couple of presses of the power button to actually get the fans to spin up. As you can see, there was some confusion here, but hitting the button a second or a third time actually did mean that the system fired up. If we pan to the monitor, we'll have a look and see whether or not this machine is booting up. No, it's not, because the screen is covered in green stripes, which is not ideal to say the least. Now that was with the HDMI connection, but when we swap to DisplayPort, any of the other DisplayPorts on the GPU, we're just greeted with a check signal cable message, meaning that we're not getting any signal from the card whatsoever. So something has definitely broken with the GPU. I do really like the HP Omen light up logo at the front though. Looks pretty cool, especially in a dark room. All sorts of things go through my head when I'm working with a dead or dying GPU. So the first thing I always tend to do is test it with another machine. It's strange really because the motherboard is Intel, the graphics card is AMD, and yet the AMD GPU has a blue PCB, whereas the motherboard, which is Intel, has red, so that's a bit weird. Amateur mistake there, leaving the cable plugged in as well upon removal. Let's actually test that we do get some output with this PC. To do that, I plugged the HDMI cable into the motherboard, and yeah, this fired up absolutely fine, no issues with the iGPU whatsoever. I did see that the machine was pin protected though, so someone hasn't quite cleared their data. What I will do though is completely format this system. Now on closer inspection, the graphics card is pretty dusty. Sometimes this can be the cause of a GPU's problems. I have had it in the past where I've just given something a good clean and it's fixed it. One can only hope. This isn't always the case, of course, but it's always the sort of first resort, the place I would go to first. I'd just give it a blast with an air duster, replace the thermal paste, because sometimes it helps and it gives a new lease of life to older cards such as this. As we can see from the PCB, wiping a bit of dust off, this is indeed an RX 580. I believe this version is found exclusively in HP PCs, but I could be wrong. The electronic air duster is one of my favourite things I've ever purchased. I just blast most things with it and it gets those big lumps of dust out pretty easily. I also cleaned the actual GPU chip itself up and then reapplied some thermal paste before putting it in a different system to test. After that, and with the heatsink and fan screwed back onto the PCB, the card was looking as good as new. Very nice. Hopefully it works and we can sell it on separately. Of course, the card had other plans because instead of green stripes all over the screen, this time we were getting red as well. So obviously this wasn't fixed. It was doing this in every other system I tried. Now as a last resort, I thought I'd try the old heat gun trick on the GPU as well. Before I went any further with the tests, I thought I'd just strip the card down again and give the chip itself a blast. Sometimes the heat gun can revive. I don't know for how long, but sometimes it works with old cards. I've certainly revived a few old beasts with this, though it's not an ideal long-term solution. Yeah, one can hope, but unfortunately no such luck here. The card was still pretty cooked. So yeah, I'm going to probably sell this separately as for parts or not working. Maybe I'll make half my money back from it. Now I still don't think this was too bad of a deal for the money, £58 all in all, and we still get an HP Omen machine. As with other pre-builts, these still seem to hold their value, especially if you're selling on eBay. We might as well check the other specs then and confirm exactly what we have. Now the RAM is indeed 16 gigabytes in total. There are two 8 gig Samsung sticks clocked at 2400 megahertz here, which I'd say is probably the minimum for 2024. You want to look at 16 gigs of RAM for any modern day gaming PC. I don't think 8 is going to quite cut it. There will be some games that run absolutely fine, but you may notice a few more frame dips and drops. I don't know about you, but I prefer my RAM modules in slot 2 and 4, so I put them back there before unscrewing the CPU heatsink fan and seeing what we were working with in terms of specs and dust. Yeah, this thing's pretty dusty, years of use here. The thermal paste could definitely do with being replaced. We'll just wipe this clear and see what this exact CPU model is, because up until this point I had no clue. It certainly wasn't listed on eBay. It's the i7-7700. This is a 4-core 8-thread chip. I was guessing that it would be an i5-8400 for some reason. I think I've seen some HP Omen machines of about this age listed with that CPU, but pretty happy with the 7700. I've never tested one before. We've tested the 7700K, so this shouldn't be too different. The heatsink itself was also pretty dusty, so of course this had a meeting with Mr. Heat Gun to blast some of the loose debris off of it. And then I thought I may as well do the same with the rest of the case. There were some pretty big bits of dust coming out of here. It looked like it was snowing in the back garden, to be honest, in the middle of June, so yeah, pretty dusty. A lot of stuff coming out of this thing. We also have the M.2 drive, as you can see pictured here. This is a 256 gig drive, so the main HDD has been removed from the system. With the CPU back in the machine, I also replaced the thermal paste for this as well, just to ensure everything was running nice and cool. I don't fancy the stock cooler much, but it should do an adequate job with the non-K variant of the 7700. Hopefully anyway, but we'll see in a minute. Of course, if you do replace your thermal paste or upgrade your CPU, don't forget to plug your CPU fan back in. I've done this before and wondered why my processor was overheating. For the tests, and because we still have a pretty decent base spec machine, the i7 7700 and 16 gigs of RAM, I decided to test it with a more modern card, the RTX 3050, just to see how the 7700 was holding up and see whether or not there were any other problems with the machine when gaming. Now this fired up absolutely fine, as you can see here with the 3050 in the system. The power supply, which is a 500 watt unit, could handle it fine as well. We did boot into recovery mode because I had hit the power switch one too many times when trying to boot up earlier on. So the i7-7700 is a 4-core 8-thread socket 1151 chip. Now we're pretty much at the end of the line with the specs here. I mean the i7 at least. We can't upgrade to an 8th or 9th gen chip in this board, so we're pretty much stuck with a 7700. This is still going to be okay, and I think for the money it's fine in 2024, but you will have to manage your expectations and you may run into a few issues, especially with frame times in certain games. Older games are going to be fine, but when it comes to those more newer releases, you will notice some slowdown simply because of the older architecture and the quad-core nature of this very CPU. So I've tested a mixture of games here. Some are going to run absolutely fine. The 3050 is being heavily limited, I would say, but the base HP Omen system itself I think was a pretty good buy for £50 plus £8 postage, and it'd be interesting to see how the 7700 holds up over the course of the next year or so. I'll probably sell this machine as is or break it for parts, but yeah, not too broken here. At least we had a working base system. It's just the RX 580 that is pretty knackered, and unfortunately will have to be sold as for parts are not working because my technical know-how doesn't extend much beyond pointing Mr. Heat Gun at a GPU and giving it a quick blast. But there we go, another system saved from the scrapyard. I like to think someone will have some use of it. I might sell it on as it is or put another GPU in here, because other than the non-functional RX 580 4 gig, the system worked fine. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.